Earth's mightiest heroes did what no one else could. They beat the Mad Titan Thanos. What could be next for the Avengers? What could be beyond Thanos? The Marvel Universe is full of threats, but it's also full of heroes to deal with those threats. The shared Marvel Cinematic Universe is in a unique position to make the most of that combination by taking on the biggest story in Marvel, Secret Wars. Let's take a look at how we're gonna get there. The Beyonder isn't your typical bad guy. Rather than having a plan for conquest or a misguided quest to save the universe from itself, he's more of an interdimensional, nearly omnipotent child who puts insects in mayo jars and sees what happens if they fight. The Beyonder's big play was Secret Wars, where he took almost the entire Marvel universe and put them on a battleworld to see who would win. It gave us moments like Mr. Fantastic telling the Hulk he's a failure, while the Hulk held half a mountain on his back, a reluctant mole man stepping up as one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe, and a sweet black suit for Spider-Man that turned out to be a living being that would become obsessed with Peter Parker. The Beyonder doesn't need a full set of MacGuffins to wield his power. He is power. His plan needs bodies. Lots and lots and lots of bodies. With a full decade of a shared universe, the MCU is in a unique position to tell a story that previously could only exist in comics. The MCU is not only perfectly set up for Secret Wars, but Secret Wars has to be their next move. The Avengers have been through a lot ever since Nick Fury showed up in their living rooms talking about an initiative he's putting together. Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff have died. Captain America hit rewind on his life and went back to get his dance with Peggy Carter. Thor was put through the ringer, losing his family, his home, his hammer, and most of his people. Hawkeye will be passing the bow soon as well. After just over 10 years and over 20 movies, you could think that the Avengers' work has been done. Thanos has been defeated, and he's the scariest thing in the universe, right? Well, maybe. There are still bad folks out there. They're the ones keeping Captain Marvel so busy. But now there isn't just one universe, there are multiple. As Doctor Strange will tell you, those threats are big too. In fact, there's one that's beyond a big threat. You get it? Beyonder? Yeah.
How's Guardians of the Galaxy back together again?
Before we get into that, though, we have to take a look at what the Avengers will even look like once we get to a 5th Avengers entry. So we have the ones that are out. Black Widow, Iron Man, Steve Rogers as Captain America, all dead or retired. There are some heroes that are destined to pass the baton. Thor will be finding Jane Foster worthy in Love and Thunder, and on the upcoming streaming series, Hawkeye will be training Kate Bishop on fighting evil with a bow and arrow. Of the original Avengers, the only question mark is the Hulk. Now that Hulk and Banner have come to terms, it's not clear what the big green guy will get up to. In a deleted scene for Endgame, we got to see that the Hulk was still all about that superhero life, saving someone from a burning building. Should he recover from snapping the nano gauntlet, he could be a factor. Or a villain. It's the Hulk. There are more than the original Avengers available to carry the banner, though. Scarlet Witch was added to the team when she channeled her anger and walked out that door in Sokovia and started hex-magicking ULTRON drones. But since then, she lost the super android love of her life. The fate of that tied up in the series WandaVision and eventually Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Spider-Man is perhaps the most eager new Avenger, but he has to ask permission first. His rights are still tied to Sony and reliant on Sony and Disney getting along. T'Challa, the Black Panther, is available when needed, but he's also the leader of a technologically advanced African country that was in hiding until recently. Valkyrie is no stranger to defending her people, but she has a much more day-to-day role in that regard now. Captain Marvel seems to keep really busy in space. Doctor Strange has never been a joiner, though that was true of most of the Avengers. They even had to pull Banner out of a jungle to get him on the team. Ant-Man and the Wasp are likely as down for being an Avenger as Hank Pym will allow. The only ones at this point we can count on is Falcon in his new role as Captain America and the Winter Soldier in his old role as troubled sidekick. Likewise, Rhodey still has his War Machine suit, even if he doesn't have his super genius pal to fix and upgrade it. That doesn't mean that this is the end for the Avengers, though. There's hope on the way. The Eternals will feature Game of Thrones Kit Harington as the Black Knight. People might be more familiar with the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail than with the Black Knight as an Avenger, but he's been a key part of the Avengers, including leading the team. There are even more characters waiting in the wings. Cassie Lang in the comics eventually takes over her dad's size-changing ways as Stature in the comics, even joining the Young Avengers. Lieutenant Trouble from the Captain Marvel movie isn't just a fan of Captain Marvel. In the comics, she is Captain Marvel. Long before Carol Danvers adopted the title, Monique Rambeau was Captain Marvel in the comics, one of the only to use that title that have nothing to do with the Kree. She's also gone by the name Photon, which was her mom's call sign in the movie. Outside traditional members of the Avengers, we have other heroes coming, like Shang-Chi in The Legend of the Ten Rings, which will introduce Marvel's Master of Kung Fu. Waiting in the wings at Disney Plus are upcoming series featuring Moon Knight, Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk. All three have been Avengers before, and with all of Marvel under the watchful eye of Kevin Feige, the television characters won't be as sectioned off from the movie characters as they were during the Infinity Saga. Overall, the future looks bright for the Avengers with a roster of new and old faces. Of course, that's just the Phase 4 changes. There are other big changes afoot fueled by the weird monolithic nature of media conglomerates and character rights. Disney has absorbed 20th Century Fox, and with it folded the rights to two of Marvel's biggest properties back under the umbrella, the Mutants and the Fantastic Four. While their movies are not yet on the roster, they are certainly coming. That's significant not just in that it brings two big parts of the Marvel Universe to the MCU, but for the people they bring with them. Back before the MCU, when the House of Ideas was out of money and selling off the rights to their characters to keep the lights on, three of their biggest properties were sold off. Those three were Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. Not only do they represent big titles, but they represent big bad guys. Though Spider-Man might have one of the best rogues galleries in comics, they are still locked away at Sony. But the X-Men and Fantastic Four have a pretty impressive roster of haters, and they're pretty far-reaching. The mutants start with all of humanity being an enemy in one way or another, as they were conceived as a heavy-handed allegory for civil rights. Of course, it doesn't stop there. They have the Hellfire Club, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. At one point, Magneto even formed his own country. Outside of humans and other mutants, the X-Men have made some extraterrestrial enemies. That includes an entire alien civilization in the Brood. The Brood were made for the MCU aesthetic, as they eat and breed as a matter of purpose. Of all the faceless army hordes, the Brood are the faceliest, hordiest enemies of them all. It doesn't stop there either, or even the universe. Doctor Strange isn't the only one to make enemies in other dimensions. The X-Men have ended up on the wrong end of the Mojoverse, an entire reality that's based around reality television. How could that go wrong? Oh, please don't answer that. After two failed attempts to tell the story, it's unlikely that the MCU will return to this one as well, but the Dark Phoenix energy comes from space as well in New Mutant Warlock and ex-enemy Nimrod. And we haven't even touched the Fantastic Four. Their main rivalry might be with Doctor Doom, but they have other enemies as well, not the least of which is the world-eating Galactus. They've also had run-ins with Ronan the Accuser and the Skrulls as well. In fact, in the second issue of the Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic hypnotized a few Skrulls into thinking they were cows. And he left them that way, like completely. They even went on to make cow-Skrull hybrids. The Silver Age was a little on the weird side for comics. If you add this to the list of enemies that are still knocking around the MCU and the ones we'll meet in the coming movies and shows, there's more than enough threat to go around for Earth's mightiest heroes and their allies. The heroes from Earth already have a pretty good scoreboard when it comes to galactic and interdimensional threats. On top of Thanos, the Guardians took out Ronan the Accuser and Ego the Living Planet, who is a Celestial in the MCU. That's no small feat. Captain Marvel turned the tide of a millennium-long war between the Kree and the Skrulls. By now, space knows Earth's name, and they're no longer just C-53. On top of all of that, there's whatever it is the Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch are about to get up to. What we know is that WandaVision is going to revolve around Wanda trying to bring Vision back to life by exercising some of that immense power that she has. Remember how mad she was during Endgame? Remember when she almost single-handedly took out Thanos until Thanos had to bomb his own troops to get out of it? She was determined to make sure he knew her name by the end. Well, she was just getting started. In the comics, she actually did what Thanos needed a special glove for. She tore reality apart, and she reassembled it to her liking, more than once. That story could end up being the mechanism that the MCU can use to bring the mutants into the fold. At the very least, when the story moves from WandaVision to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he power promises to threaten the barriers between the multiverses. And also, Nightmare will do stuff. He's kind of a jerk that way. So we have a new set of heroes to fill the MCU in the coming years, and those new heroes have some great villains that come with them. All we need now is the traditional big bad. Even though on the surface, Avengers was the result of a sibling rivalry between a pair of Asgardian brothers, a short scene at the end of the credits let us know that the Mad Titan Thanos was pulling the strings. Over the course of the Infinity Saga, Thanos was the seldom-seen puppet master. As the Red Skull pulled the Tesseract out of hiding to conquer Earth, and the Dark Elves pulled the Ether out of hiding to take on Asgard, Thanos' quest for the stones was underway. He just had to send his daughter and Ronan to pick up the Power Stone and figure out where the Soul Stone is, and his plan can be realized. While Thanos wasn't above using other villains as proxies for his evil plan, it was ultimately his evil plan. When it came time for the showdown, it was Thanos' armies and the Black Order against, well, everybody else. That's not the way the Beyonder rolls, though. The Beyonder is actually a product of the multiverse, in that he comes from the essential sum total of the multiverses. During the initial Secret Wars storyline, he emerges into our reality and starts piecing together a planet he ends up calling the Battleworld, where he put all of the superheroes and all of the bad guys in one place, and made them fight so he could understand the struggle between good and evil. That's where we get Molecule Man dropping a mountain on our heroes, Mr. Fantastic telling the Hulk he's a loser, Spider-Man getting a new suit, and even a scary moment where Dr. Doom manages to siphon off some of that sweet Beyonder power. That's the kind of story that needs a vastly populated world. The MCU is that vastly populated world. The final battle in Endgame was almost as long as a short movie, and that still wasn't everybody.
Is that everyone? But you wanted more?
Yes, Wong, we wanted more. Where were the Defenders? This is not an opportunity that will happen easily again. The shared universe was a unique opportunity to tell a story as big as the Infinity Gauntlet, and with the additions in Phase 4, it's set to be big enough to tell the story of Secret Wars. There are a few ways this can happen. Currently, Avengers 5 doesn't have a release date, just something we're certain is going to happen after the MCU rebuilds its roster for a few years. The direct way is to not wait. The Beyonder pokes out into the universe, sees all the heroes, and decides, what would it be like if they all fought? It certainly gets the ball rolling, and it isn't that far out of character for the Beyonder either. Secret Wars was just the beginning for the guy who could look like anything, but for some reason chose buff Alan Alda dressed like an extra from Miami Vice. In fact, the first Secret Wars didn't even really have an appearance by the world's most menacing man perm. He was just a disembodied voice telling everybody to fight or else. It wasn't until Secret Wars 2 that he adopted the wet curl and shoulder pad look when he took human form to walk amongst the Marvel Universe to get a feel for what it was like. During that time, he tried to learn the worries of economic insecurity by talking to Luke Cage, temporarily gave Matt Murdock his sight back, tried to date Dazzler for some reason, and generally mucked about before he decided, as otherworldly powerful beings do, that he needed to tear the entire universe to shreds. Part of that had to do with Mephisto forming an army to kill the Beyonder because a being like the Beyonder is even bad for the baddest of bad guys. So even if the MCU jumps straight to Secret Wars, because that would set up the second Secret Wars, or even the most recent one where Dr. Doom became the overlord of the Battleworlds and used an army of Thors as his enforcers. It even had all the Ghost Riders racing against each other. But the MCU has never really been completely beholden to the comic book storylines. Civil War didn't start with the failures of a reality show-based superhero team. Thanos wasn't trying to impress Lady Death with more death. The Age of Ultron was really more like the Fortnite, 2 weeks, not the game, of Ultron. The Mandarin was just a guy named Trevor. Well, that might not actually be the case when Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings comes out, but that's another video. There is a way to have Avengers 5 be part of Secret Wars without jumping straight to the all-star festival of superheroes simply by inverting the order of the Secret Wars. That would mean that whatever it is that pushes the new Avengers together would be something that the Beyonder observes. Maybe even pushes the conflict a bit into being to see how good deals with evil. Kevin Feige has signaled that X-Men vs. Avengers is definitely on the table for the future of the MCU, which would be exactly the kind of thing that the Beyonder would help along in his urge to see how this universe deals with conflict. If he's a being that's been released by Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch mucking about in the multiverse and he starts walking among it, he could eventually come to the conclusion that the best way to deal with the everything is to take all the heroes and all the villains and put them on one planet and let them duke it out to figure out who wins, good or evil. If there was anything that would top the massive finale of the Infinity Saga, it would be all the villains and heroes coming together for a winner-take-all battle royale. This would also give an engine to the MCU post-Thanos, as we watch heroes come to terms with the idea of what it is to be a superhero in a world of superheroes, instead of the introduction of superheroes to a sort of hero-less world. It did have a super soldier and a secret organization led by another evil super soldier in it, and a Howard Stark making Howard Stark things. And we might get to see Mr. Fantastic call the Hulk worthless. And that's why, one way or another, the 5th Avengers movie will have to revolve around the Beyonder and Secret Wars. When do you want to see the Beyonder arrive? Let us know in the comments. And while you're there, why not subscribe to CBR for the latest videos in your inbox? Thanks a lot for watching.